Welcome to Philosophy Insights. Many in the mainstream media still argue that cancel culture is not real. The reality is that the foundation of individual rights and expression tracked over 1,000 attempts to get professors fired. And this is only looking at academia. The society wide chilling effect is enormous. Here is Greg Lukianoff, president of FIRE, and Rikki Schlott, columnist for the New York Post, on the issue.
People are still saying that cancel culture does not exist, which is absolutely crazy and defies all statistics fundamentally. But also, cancel culture is not just about the people that are torn down, it's about the epistemic crisis that it creates and the devastation of the body of common knowledge that we all share, and also the undermining of trust in between people interpersonally. And for me as a young person, the undermining of being able to grow up and have the freedom to fumble and make mistakes as well. So I think it's important on a ton of different levels.
I have to say, as an old person, eh, tough. You should have been born when I was born. But would you, Greg, what is the working definition of cancel culture?
It's basically we're trying to give it the name of this historical era that we're in. I'm a First Amendment lawyer. I'm big on the history of freedom of speech, and a lot of what we call mass censorship events have names. So Alien Sedition, 1798, even though it's really the Sedition Act of 1798, Red Scare 1, 20s, Red Scare 2, also known as McCarthyism, etc. PMRC, the comic book scare. So basically, we're proposing more or less that this be a historical definition of a unique and weird period where there's been a lot of people losing their jobs because of their opinion. That's really one of the things we're trying to show is that this is on par with any of these previous moments of mass censorship and actually exceeds them in terms of numbers of professors fired.
Yeah, talk a bit about the professors, because I mean, there are a couple of different sites, right, or locations where this is particularly strong. Yeah. Academia, clearly one of them. What are the numbers that you're talking about?
Yeah, so this was an interesting thing. We now have a great research department at FIRE, and that was, partially a labor of love on my part because I was always the lawyer who was pretending to be FIRE social scientist. But we've been able to grow it. That's how we actually have our campus free speech rankings, which is based on the 13 different factors. So real quick through the stats. And our definition is the uptick of campaigns beginning around 2014 to get people fired, deplatformed, expelled, and the culture of fear that resulted from that. And I think it's always important to root numbers in comparisons. When I started at FIRE, I actually landed in Philadelphia at 9:10 a.m. on 9/11. All of my first cases were involving people who said jerky or insensitive things about the attacks, or people who said, let's go get those terrorists, but said it in a considered to be rude way. We now know, and it was a bad period for academic freedom. There was a moral panic, and it actually followed the normal MO of mass censorship events in history. There was a national security crisis. That's usually the way it goes. It's either a national security crisis or a large-scale war that you have these mass censorship events. And it was bad, and everybody knew it was bad. And 17 professors were targeted for being canceled, as we would say, which basically means like punished for their speech. There were more students as well, but we were pretty small at the time. So, we know that we probably only know a fraction of the students who got in trouble. 3 professors were fired. That's really, really bad historically. Having like one professor being fired, Stephen Salita, resulted in an entire issue of the American Association of University Presidents, University Professors, to do a whole summer issue on it. And all 3 of those professors, by the way, were justified under things that weren't related to speech. Ward Churchill had a pretty long history of academic misconduct that was real. One of the other ones, Samuel Arian, was fired because of real ties to terrorist organizations. And the third one was fired on the basis that she stopped teaching her class for a substantial chunk of time and talked about something that wasn't related. So again, bad, chilled speech, period. I wasn't used to professors getting fired, though, and never tenured professors in my early career. For cancel culture, we're talking about over 1,000 attempts to get professors fired or punished in some way. About 2/3 of them result in someone being punished in some way. About 1/5 of them, about 200, result in them losing their jobs, which, by the way, like the number during McCarthyism of people who lost their job due to being a communist is about 62, 63. They count other people who lost their opinions in this massive study that they did right towards the end of McCarthyism. There were about 90 fired for their opinion overall, which is usually rounded up to 100. We now think that there's probably somewhere between 100 and 150 fired. So 200 people fired means it's worse, like in terms of like actual numbers.
What's the time period that you're
2014 to mid last year to July, and the period that's considered McCarthyism is 11 years.
Right.
It's 47 to 57. So we still have time. But I did want to add one more stat. 1 in 6, we know this is a crazy undercount as well. 1 in 6 professors, according to our survey, 1 in 6 say that they've been either threatened with investigation or investigated for their academic freedom. That means the numbers are absolutely colossal. Students, about 9% of them say that they've actually been faced sanctions for their speech. That's an insanely huge number. And about 1/3 of professors say that they've been told to avoid controversial research. So we know that we're only seeing a portion of it.
Cancel culture promotes a culture of fear and censorship. The following case is especially illuminating to understand the impact of cancel culture.
Recently, there was a case there that I think was unusual in the sense that it just got widespread disdain from across the political aisle because it was such an egregious case of cancel culture and a liberalism on campus. But there was a professor named Erica Lopez Prater who decided to show in one of her courses an image of the Prophet Muhammad, which is considered sacrilegious by some people who follow Islam. And so she said in her syllabus that was going to be on. She in a class. She told people that you could get an excuse from class if it's untenable for you to see that. She warned them multiple times ahead of time. She gave ample warning in every way, shape, and form. And also just told everyone that the only reason I'm showing you this is because there are some sects of Islam that do not find this offensive. This is a piece of art that was by a Muslim, commissioned by a Muslim king. And in the end, she ended up being squeezed out of her job for doing that because one student did show up to that class, decided afterwards that she was offended, and did basically like a PR, like a press conference, right?
Yeah.
Basically saying that she'd been so offended and aggrieved. And the president of the university came out and said that this is beyond freedom of speech. This is just offensive. And she ended up getting squeezed out for that reason. And it was a perfect example of cancel culture just defying common sense, defying just pluralism and democracy in a very fundamental level. And so that's why we decided to call this one out as our first opener, because pretty much everyone condemned it in the end. It was unbelievable, and Hamline did have to reverse course.
And if there's a
she's still fired, and the university president stepped down. But more recently, they basically said that they did the right thing in this case. And one of the best articles about this is actually Amna Khalid, who's a Muslim, and she said, "I'm offended as a Muslim, but she's offended at the idea that all of Muslims should be offended by devotional art because Americans can be very parochial sometimes. Both my parents are foreign, and they just kind of assumed, oh, every Muslim would be offended by this. I'm like, that means you don't know enough about what you're talking about.
I was going to say the happy ending there is that the university president kind of got pushed out.
Yeah.
It is also important to note the effect on journalism itself. James Bennett, who was the New York Times opinion page editor, is a prime example for someone who got canceled for trying to present a politically balanced approach to a controversial issue.
I wrote an article about this, basically trying to remind people that James Bennett, was, and part of what they wanted him to do was help fix the fact that in 2016, the New York Times was like, wow, we're incredibly out of touch. We really didn't see Trump happening. And then you added people like Barry Weiss to the staff. You added people like Brett Stevens, both of whom they got from the Wall Street Journal. There was an attempt to actually have more conservatives involved, and also to have people like James Bennett, who seemed to be, open to covering things from all over the political spectrum. He was our editor when Coddling in the American Mind came out at the Atlantic, so that was kind of the setting. But then there was, I think you can tell the rest of the story.
Yeah. So Tom Cotton, who's a sitting senator speaking the minds of a plurality of Americans at the time, made an op-ed case for bringing troops in to quell BLM riots and protests. Obviously controversial, but also a viewpoint that is worth hearing if it's a sitting senator and if that's something that a lot of Americans are animated to do at the time.
And shared by the president of the United States at the same time.
Yeah, no kidding. And as a result, I mean, this is something that's frightening to both of us as civil libertarians, that prospect. But as a result of just that op-ed being published, there was a widespread petition at the New York Times that a ton of their, I think in the hundreds of their employees signed, saying that they felt unsafe being there. There were people torn down, including Bennett and also Barry Weiss at the same point in time ended up resigning. There was an institutional meltdown over a viewpoint that was widely held that should have been tolerated. And in the end, instead of tolerating just the person who signed off on that op-ed, we had to tear him down, not just the person who even had the opinion in the first place. So I think, there's a really, this is a near and dear case study in my heart, because I'm 23. I only recently started my career in journalism. And I think that there's a really profound effect that this is going to have with the next generation of young people who might be more heterodox, who might be in the center or right-leaning like myself, who say, I can't go into the lion's den at an institution like this, where you really do want the biggest and most respected newspaper in the country to be a place where different viewpoints can collide.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy videos like this, please subscribe and hit the notification bell.